Solve the quadratic inequality and then write the solution set in interval notation. We have x squared minus 4x, which is less than or equal to -2. Okay, so first thing we want to do is make sure that this inequality has a 0 on the right side of the inequality form. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. So therefore, we have x squared minus 4x plus 2, and that's going to be less than or equal to 0. Okay, now we want to be able to find the interval boundaries by factoring this quadratic inequality. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 2, and then we're setting that equal to 0. So in this case here, we cannot factor this any further. So therefore, we're going to have to use the quadratic formula to find those interval boundaries. We know that a is equal to 1. We know the value of b is -4. And we know the value of c is equal to 2. So let's use the quadratic formula to find those interval boundaries. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So let's plug in the values. So we have negative times -4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is -4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 2, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So we end up with a negative times a negative, which is 4, plus or minus the square root of -4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 1 times 2, which is 8. So that's minus 8, all over 2 times 1. So we end up with 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 8, which is 8 over 2. Now keep in mind we need to simplify that square root of 8, which is the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which gives us 2 times the square root of 2. So we get 4 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, and then we need to share the denominator, so we have 4 over 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2 over 2. We know 4 divided by 2 is going to give us 2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2, which is going to give us the square root of 2. So therefore, those are our interval boundaries. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and then draw and find out what our number line looks like with our interval boundaries. So here is our number line going from -infinity to +infinity. Okay, and so we have 2 minus the square root of 2. So let's go ahead and find out what that number is. So if we take 2, subtract the square root of 2, well, that gives us 0.5. So that means somewhere over here we have 2 minus the square root of 2, which is about 0.6. And then where is 2 plus the square root of 2? That's right, 3.4. So that's probably like around here. So we have 2 plus the square root of 2. So therefore, here are our interval boundaries. We have 1, interval 1, interval 2, interval 3. So for interval 1, we're going from -infinity to 2 minus the square root of 2. Interval 2, let me see if I can write that a little bit better with a little bit more room. So interval 2 is going to be 2 minus the square root of 2, 2 plus the square root of 2. And then interval 3 is 2 plus the square root of 2 to positive infinity. Now we're going to go ahead and then check our testing points for each interval. So let's take a look at interval 1. So for interval 1, we can choose 0. So we're going to plug in 0 and then use this formula here. So we have 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 2, is that less than or equal to 0? Well, that gives us 0, that gives us 0. Is 2 less than or equal to 0? Well, that answer is false. So it's false for interval 1. For interval 2, okay, remember this number was approximately 0.6, and this was approximately 3.4. So we can pick the value of 1 here as our testing point. So x is going to equal 1. So if we have 1 squared minus 4 times 1 plus 2, we want to see if that's less than or equal to 0. So we have 1 minus 4 plus 2. Well, 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. And is negative 1 less than or equal to 0? Well, it's true. So therefore, we know it's true for interval 2. And then for interval 3, we can pick 4, since 4 is on the outside of that. So when x is equal to 4, we have 4 squared minus 4 times 4 plus 2. So that's 16 minus 16 plus 2, which is less than or equal to 0. And is 2 less than or equal to 0? Well, that is false. So it's false for region number 3. So we can determine here now that it's true for interval 2, which is the following. Okay. Now, keep in mind that this says less than or equal to. So instead of using the parentheses, it's going to be bracket 2 minus the square root of 2, comma 2 plus the square root of 2, bracket. And there is our solution. So let's go ahead and type that in to check our result. So the solution set, we have bracket 2 minus the square root of 2, comma 2 plus the square root of 2 with a bracket. Let's check our result, and there is our answer.